West Africa, which is Nouakchott, where the 31st session of the African Union is currently sitting. We're live there now. Now, from the program, we can gauge that the joint African Union, European Union Women in Power event is set to kick off this hour. Now, this is a joint AU-EU high-level meeting on women in power at the 31st African Union Summit in Nouakchott, Mauritania. And the chairperson of the AU and president of the Republic of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, is expected to address this special session. Let's go there live now.
Mouknas, Ministre des Affaires sociales, de l'enfance.
Minister of Social Affairs, Childhood and Family of Mauritania, Islamic Republic of Mauritania, to deliver her opening address. Honorable Minister, you are kindly invited to do so. In the name of Allah, the merciful and compassionate, and pray and peace be upon His Holy Prophet, Your Excellency Paul Kagame, Chairperson of the African Union and President of the Republic of Rwanda, Inongo Munugwa, His Excellency Inongo Okwa, the Vice President of Zambia, Your Excellency Amina Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General, UN Deputy Secretary General of Your Excellency Chairperson Moussa Faki of the African Union, Your Excellency Mr. Moussa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency the Commissioner, His Excellency Neven Mimika, European Union Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development of the European Union, Honorable Ministers, elected officials and human rights commissioners, chairperson of the urban development area of Nouakchott, representatives of civil society, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Mauritanian women, I would like to renew my welcome to you to the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, the land of peace, land of love, land of African brotherhood. Eternal. I welcome you to the land of men, and behind every man, any great man, there is a woman, as you are all aware. Ladies and gentlemen, when our leaders in 2015 ratified the agenda, 2063 agenda, they placed before them a number of aspirations in order to fulfill the dreams of African peoples when it comes to prosperity, development and so on. And this aspiration was a call for Africa to depend on its resources, especially human resources like women and youth, so that they can achieve their development goals and to ensure that they are effective partners and influential partners on the international scene. So the fulfillment of this aspiration is available if we are able to empower the African woman, well rehabilitated and who is serious about her responsibilities towards her responsibilities on the continent overall. And I would like to welcome welcome this meeting which is taking place under the chairperson of President Paul Kagame, and this is an expression of a noble political willingness of the leaders of our continent in their effort to ensure the role of women and the role of women in development. The government of my country has been a pioneer when it comes to empowering women and give her the rightful station and position in terms of education, rehabilitation, and empowerment and responsibility. I have been honored by the President Abdul Aziz by making me the first lady to be appointed as a diplomat in Africa and in the Arab world. I have also occupied a special ministry for women, children, and the family. And today here in Mauritania, the women are occupying vital and leadership roles in the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, and in security and military institutions. And she has given priority on affirmative action when it comes to electoral lists at both levels, national and local, in order to empower her so that she has access to leadership roles. So in this regard, we are heading towards the achievement of the 2063 agenda that is designed to devote 50% of elective positions for women, and to remove economic impediments and political impediments that prevent the development and empowerment of men. The Mauritanian experiment, despite its outstanding and pioneering roles, is not the only model on our continent, which has witnessed over the past years a rational and realistic approach towards the empowerment of women. And on behalf of my African sisters, I cannot but express my deep gratitude to His Excellency President Paul Kagame for the blessed and studious efforts he has made in this regard, not only in Rwanda, but also at the continental level during his chairmanship of the African Union. And I would also like to seize this opportunity to commend the essential role played by our development partners, especially the European Union, which has kept pace and support projects that are related to women's empowerment in general. And once again, I would like to renew my welcome to you to Nouakchott here, the capital of Africa, which aspire to ensure integration and development. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Nous vous remercions.
I'd like to thank you, Honorable Minister, for this excellent and eloquent opening address and welcome address.
Distinguished guests, once again, please allow me to appreciate the Ministry of Gender of Mauritania and the women of this country for their warm hospitality and their commitment as expressed through their very strong participation in this event today. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as a country, Rwanda has blazed the trail in being true to its words and support for the cause of gender equality beyond their borders, beyond the continent, and globally. Their actions and policies speak for themselves, which is expressed through their ranking as the 4th country in the world to have placed women at the center of their project. As a result, today, the status of women in Rwanda is celebrated around the continent, and that celebration is one we all take great pride in on our continent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and friends, I therefore have the honor and unique privilege to respectfully invite His Excellency President Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda and Chairperson of the African Union, but also, as we like to say, one of our sisters keepers, global he for she for we, to make his opening statement. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please warmly welcome His Excellency President Paul Kagame. Thank you.
Excellencies, leaders of government, Vice President of Zambia, Nonge winner, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki Mahamat, Excellency Neven Mimisa, European Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Excellency Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Honorable Ministers and senior government officials, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be with you for this important event. As we have heard, this is a joint initiative of the African Union Commission and the European Commission, and I want to commend the committed efforts of Commissioner Neven Mimisa and Chairperson Musa Faki, but above all, also alongside that, I want again to recognize and appreciate the direction already mentioned by the Minister of Gender of Mauritania, who introduced everything to us. Thank you. We had actually hoped to convene this meeting earlier, but I think the timing has turned out to be good. For one thing, it allows us to enjoy Mauritanian hospitality. I thank the government of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania for hosting us. Second, this good collaboration between our respective institutions is significant in its own right, above and beyond the importance we attach to the topic of women in power. Third, gender equality is always on the agenda. It is a top priority for both the African Union and the European Union. Women's empowerment happens to have been the theme of European Development Days this year, and I was happy to participate. I had the pleasure of participating in this event earlier this month, together with their excellencies, the presidents of Burkina Faso, Liberia, and Niger. So we are building on that momentum. On our continent, we adopted the solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa in 2004. That framework continues to guide our work. Equality between men and women in all spheres of life is also the vision defined in the African Union's Agenda 2063. Africa and Europe are fully aligned on this issue. We have achieved a lot together, but there is also much more we need to do in the future. Despite the goodwill, substantial problems remain in the way of women's, whether cultural, legal, and economic empowerment. There are important policy changes to advocate for, and that will always be important and must continue to be a priority as will be discussed today. But tying those dimensions together are persistent negative mindsets and norms about gender roles that continue to slow down progress. By that, I'm talking about all of us. Women can deliver more when they are enjoying their full rights, but with men and women working together, using their talents to the maximum, the effect is not just additive, it actually multiplies. All of society benefits. The sum is indeed much greater than the parts. Today's event is a part of this process, and I therefore wish you a productive set of discussions. And once again, we will always be available to participate and make our contributions whenever that will be called for and necessary. I wish to thank you very much for your kind attention.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as the saying goes by one of our eminent thinkers, if you don't want to be criticized, say nothing, do nothing, and there'll be nothing. Mr. President, Excellency, we thank you for having challenged the status quo and becoming today the reference for gender equality in Africa and also around the world. Excellencies, the European Union, as was stated by His Excellency President Paul Kagame, is the co-organizer of this important and landmark event on gender equality. Gender equality is a shared value for all of humanity, no matter where we are on the globe. Therefore, without further ado, it's my honor to respectfully invite His Excellency Neven Mimitsa, Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development of the European Union, to please make his remarks. Excellency, thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, Presidents, Vice Presidents, Ministers, Ambassadors, Your Excellency Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, dear Amina, Your Excellency Chairperson of the African Union Commission, dear Musa, ladies and few gentlemen around this table, and my dear colleagues and friends, dear President Kagame, thank you very much for having accepted to organize this event, the first African Union-European Union joint event ever organized in the margins of the African Union Summit. Six months after the Abidjan Summit, I'm happy and proud that we are back around the same table to discuss an issue which is at the core of my mandate as European Commissioner for Development. That is to say, gender equality and women's empowerment. In Europe, 1 woman out of 3 has experienced sexual, physical violence, or both. Only 3 countries have at least 40% women in parliament. Only 4 countries have equal numbers of men and women in government. The road ahead is long, and efforts should be, of course, at home. They should start at home. When talking about our action in the world, our commitment is that 80% of European programs, development programs, promote gender equality by 2020. In the specific area of sexual and gender-based violence, we recently launched a 500 million euros Spotlight initiative together with the United Nations. Half of this amount will be for Africa. More than money, what we need is a change of mindset, both in Europe and in Africa. And to me, men should be at the forefront of this effort. There is not a single area of life, not a single one, where you can afford to ignore women. From education to peace and stability, from health to climate change, from conflict prevention to entrepreneurship. The day you start ignoring half of this world, the day you start ignoring the biggest potential humanity has, you are damned to fail. And this is valid from the smallest village to the most powerful political offices on this planet. Experts often say that one of the failures of development programs is due to a lack of political will, a lack of ownership, or a lack of resources. I think that the biggest explanation to such failures is the fact we have ignored women. We have confined them in specific areas, and we haven't made them the actors of development. In many countries around the globe, gender is what defines your destiny. This is one of the most despicable inequalities in this world. The good news is that we all can do something. The change is within the reach. The power is in our hands. As political leaders, we can fight to give women a voice. As husbands, we can make sure that equality starts at home. As fathers, we can teach our little boys to respect their fellow girlfriends. As men, we can spread the word that women's empowerment is also our business and that we will stand for it. As human beings, we can decide that gender is not what defines us. We can decide that what unites us is our common humanity. Today we have around the table political leaders who walk the talk. We have around the table institutions that have put those issues on top of their agendas. We have around this table thousands of women who count on us. I want Africa and Europe to put gender equality and women's empowerment on top of their common agenda. I want us to find synergies between what we do politically and financially. I want us to be partners to change the social and cultural stereotypes and practices that hold us all back. President Kagame, in Brussels recently, you described gender equality as common sense. Now, together, let's make sure it's common practice. Thank you very much.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, allow me therefore to take this opportunity to thank, through His Excellency Commissioner Mimica, all partners here present for their continued support, but also to congratulate all the European governments who today have feminist governments and also have feminist foreign policies, which is a further demonstration of their commitment. Avant de procéder, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs,
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, His Excellency President Mahamadou Issoufou is in our midst. His Excellency President Mahamadou Issoufou, the President of the Republic of Niger and the champion for the Continental Free Trade Area, you're welcome, Mr. President.
The United Nations is an important partner. In January 2018, at the 30th Summit, we had the honor to host His Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, where he shared with us during a high-level heads of state breakfast meeting the groundbreaking news that for the first time in the history of this global body, half of its female leadership team were women, a record time achievement. We therefore know that it's not only possible, but it can be done. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I therefore have the honor to respectfully introduce Her Excellency, Madame Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General, to make remarks. Madame, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Paul Kagame, the President of the Republic of Rwanda, and might I say our #1 feminist on the continent. Your Excellency, President Mahamadou Yusufu, the Vice President of Tanzania, Your Excellency, Mr. Musa Faki Mohammed, the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency, Commissioner Nevin Mimisa of the European Union Commission, Excellencies, my sisters, and especially our host, our Minister for Social Affairs and Culture and Family of Mauritania. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to begin by thanking the Women and Gender Development Directorate of the African Union Commission for bringing us together for this important high-level meeting, and I applaud the African Union Commission's commitment to reaching gender parity at its decision-making levels. I am proud that the UN has also followed your steps and reached a similar goal, with parity in the most senior leadership at headquarters and now amongst our resident coordinators at the country level. We need to see even stronger efforts to address parity at all levels, end discriminatory practices, and strengthen gender equality in both our respective organizations. I know that in this we can count on each other as strong partners. One key action that we must all take is to stop violence against women. We know that violence and discrimination are two sides of the same coin. Violence against women and girls, including sexual violence, is a serious and pervasive violation of women's rights, which are human rights. It is rooted in unequal access to empowerment and harmful social norms and stereotypes. The United Nations, together with our European Union partner, is specifically targeting the issue through the Spotlight Initiative. And this global multi-year initiative is focused on eliminating all forms of violence against women and girls. And as Commissioner Mimisa said, the overall grant of 500 million euros from the European Union will put half of it to programs in Africa that are focused on sexual and gender-based violence, sexual and reproductive health and rights, including traditional harmful practices. At the same time, it is critical to urgently address women's political participation and leadership to counter the current regression of women's political leadership in Africa. Despite some progress, we now no longer have a woman head of state on the continent, although we commend all those that are the deputies. This means working to significantly increase the role of women in political processes across the countries and in government, and to enhance leadership opportunities, especially for our young women in decision-making. There have been important steps in that direction through initiatives such as FemWise Africa and Africa Women Leaders Network, which were both launched last year. The Network of African Women in Conflict Prevention and Mediation, also known as FemWise Africa, aims to ensure the participation of women in African Union-led peace processes in Africa. This is not a women's issue, that is fundamentally a peace and security issue. We have decades of evidence that shows that more inclusive processes are simply more comprehensive and more sustainable. Beyond leadership, we also need to invest in the followership. And FemWise is an important contribution in this regard. The African Women's Leader Network is designed to empower women leaders across the continent to build the Africa that we all want. Last July, we furthered its goals by undertaking a joint solidarity mission of the United Nations and the African Union to Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo. During that visit, I had the opportunity to meet with women survivors of gender-based violence and to support women's political participation, economic empowerment, all ahead of the upcoming elections. We are now preparing our next joint mission after this African Union meeting to Chad, Niger, and South Sudan, where we will also have a chance to address various issues related to peace and security, development, climate security, and violent extremism, but more important, to find the islands of stability in these nations, that we may bring investments that truly do trek our path towards sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are to support more women in power and realize the goals of the 2030 Agenda and the 2063 Agenda, we need to act now on these issues, particularly through sustained investments in skills and education for our women and girls. Together we can build safer communities and a stronger continent with and for women and girls. They are, after all, half of our human asset, and we must invest in them. There is not yet a bird that has flown on half a wing. I thank you.
Excellence.
All right, you're watching the SABC News channel. That was a live crossing to the 31st African Union Summit in Nouakchott, Mauritania. What you're looking at now, of course, is the joint AU-EU Women in Power event held on the sidelines of the summit. Opening remarks there by Dr. Amina Mohammed, the United Nations Deputy Secretary General, bringing into sharp focus that despite some progress, we still don't have a woman head of state in Africa, pointing to a greater need for more political participation by women in the political space. Dr. Mohammed was the Minister of Environment for Nigeria from November 2015 to December 2016, where you'll remember she steered the country's efforts on climate action, protecting the natural environment and conserving resources for sustainable development. Prior to this, Dr. Mohammed served as a special advisor to former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, on the post-2015 development planning, where she was instrumental in bringing about the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals. We also had their opening remarks from the Chairperson of the African Union and President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, and the European Union Commissioner for International Cooperation and Development, Neven Mimika, who both convened this inaugural, the very first joint meeting that we're seeing on women between the African Union and the European Union, both highlighting for us the need for more effort to be made toward gender equality on the continent. Mimika reiterating the need for change in mindset in men in Africa and Europe to combat sexual violence against women. Now, he emphasizes men's role in the fight for gender equality and women empowerment. Both leaders calling for more synergy in this mission. It hopes to further Aspiration 6 on Agenda 2063 and emphasizing global commitment and the conscious need to increase traction for transformational action for gender equality and women empowerment. What we're seeing is the AU and the EU now joining forces to renew political commitment to realize this agenda. You will remember it was South Africa's own Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, during her tenure as head of the AU, who spearheaded the launch of Agenda 2063, a long-term vision of where we want to be as a continent in 50 years. She did manage to crack the glass ceiling in Africa and become the very first African woman to lead this continental body. She did make women's rights the theme of 2 consecutive AU summits, and the AU did start a major campaign to end child marriage under her watch. The objective of this particular meeting, though, is to strengthen political support to make gender equality and women empowerment not just an aspiration on paper, but a lived reality for the majority of African women. Now, on that note, let's cross over to some other news on